It started with a number, printed in black ink on a white sheet of paper, $84.19. A gym charge in my name from a place I had never stepped foot in. Cleveland Fitness Plus, September 14th. I held the statement under the kitchen light, tilting it as though the glare might reveal a hidden truth. I'm Harold Mercer. Most people call me Hal, 54 years old, master auto upholsterer, widower, father of one. I live my life by order. Every bolt in my workshop, every receipt in my filing cabinet, every leather swatch labeled. My wife, Marianne, used to tease me, said I could probably balance the national budget with the way I tracked receipts. And she was right. But that night, staring at that charge, I felt something loosen inside me, a thread pulling. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The next week, another charge appeared. $36.75. Candles from an online boutique. Then 2 meal kit subscriptions, both billed in my name. Then came a spa charge. When I added them up, it was nearly $500 in the span of 3 weeks. I still remember Sunday dinner on September 25th. The roast beef sat untouched on my plate. The silence in the dining room thicker than the steam rising off the gravy. My son, Ethan, 26, shoveled potatoes onto his plate like nothing was wrong. His wife, Kayla, twirled her fork, smirking as though she were in on a joke I couldn't hear. I slid the statement across the table. Ethan, you recognize these? He barely looked. Just shrugged. Maybe you stir mixing things up, Dad. You've been off lately. Off. That word stung more than the numbers. Kayla leaned in, her voice honeyed but sharp. Don't stress him, Hal. Mistakes happen when people are under pressure. But I knew pressure. I had survived 6 months of chemo with Marianne sitting by her side, every IV drip recorded in a little black notebook. I knew what it meant to hold order together under chaos. This was set pressure. This was theft. On October 1st, the hammer fell. A bill for $2,800 arrived, an HVAC installation invoice with initials scrawled across the bottom. HM, except those weren't my initials, not in my handwriting, not in any universe. The date read September 28th. I underlined it twice and circled the timestamp. When I confronted Ethan, he laughed. Actually laughed. Dad, you said, slipping. Maybe you signed it and forgot. It happens. You said you're not a kid anymore. Slipping, I repeated the word, as if rolling it in my mouth could make sense of it. Slipping was what Marianne did in her last weeks, when her hands trembled and her knitting needles slipped from her fingers. Slipping was watching her fade from my arms into the white sheets of hospice. Slipping was grief, not incompetence. I wasn't slipping. I was being robbed. That night, after they left, I sat alone in my workshop. The smell of leather and adhesive filled the air. I pulled open my ledger, the thick brown one Marianne had given me for Christmas in 2012. Every charge, every dollar, every name had its place. I wrote down the gym charge, the candles, the meal kits, the spa, the HVAC invoice. 5 lines, red pen. Beneath it I wrote, not mine. I felt my chest tighten, not from age or illness, but from betrayal. I wanted to confront them again, to storm into Ethan's apartment and demand the truth. But Marianne's voice came back to me, soft, steady. Hal, order before anger, always order. So I chose proof over argument. That night I took the HVAC invoice and slipped it into a manila envelope. I made a copy at the corner print shop the next morning, dated October 2nd. I tucked one into my ledger, one into my desk drawer. I wasn't just keeping records anymore. I was preparing for war. The charges didn't stop. On October 5th, I spotted another line, $129 for electronics, purchased at a store across town. I hadn't crossed that zip code in months. The following Friday, I heard Ethan on the phone in the living room, his voice low but not low enough. Yeah, don't worry. He wanted, remember, he sets declining. We set take care of the house once the paperwork sets in. Declining. That word was worse than slipping. It wasn't just a dismissal, it was a diagnosis. I stood in the hallway listening, the air so heavy I could hardly breathe. Kayla Sepp's laugh followed, sharp as glass. He doesn't even notice half the time. Just push the bills through. If he asks, say he forgot. My hand tightened on the door frame until my knuckles turned white. I realized then this wasn't just about money. This was about erasing me. Every dollar stolen was another line in a story they were writing. A story where I was the senile father, incapable of handling my own life. But I had the ledger. I had the receipts. And I had Marianne's voice reminding me keep things in order. So I did. On October 7th, I stapled the latest bank statement to the back of the HVAC invoice. On October 9th, I photographed each page with my phone and emailed them to myself. I labeled the folder Truth. I sat back in my workshop chair, staring at the glowing screen, and whispered, "They want to build incompetence. I settled build proof." And that was the first step, choosing silence, not surrender, collecting evidence, not arguments. Because when blood betrays you, shouting does nothing. Paper does everything. There's a kind of quiet that hurts. Not the quiet of a house at night, but the quiet inside your own name when people start saying it like a question. Like I might not answer to it anymore. On Monday, September 26th, the city felt like fall had finally made up its mind. Lake Erie wind cutting down West 25th, leaves sticking to my boots, as I walked from the shop to Rose's apartment with a bag of cinnamon rolls. I shouldn't have bought. Marianne and I used to share them, half and half. Pink napkins, Sunday mornings. Now I carried two and ate none. Rosa opened her door before I knocked. "You going to keep hovering like a sad ghost, Mr. Mercer?" she teased, warm as the cinnamon on the air. "Thought a bribe," I said, lifting the bag. She searched my face, the way people do when they heard something and want to confirm it without asking. "Come inside." Her kitchen felt like a memory I wanted to borrow. Potted basil on the sill, AM radio whispering baseball scores. I poured us coffee. She let the silence stretch. Then she said it. "Kayla stopped here Saturday, borrowed sugar, mentioned you." "What did she say?" "That you've been forgetful." The word clicked on the counter like a dropped spoon. I stirred my coffee, though there was nothing in it. "Forgetful." I tried to make it sound small, ridiculous. It echoed anyway. "She said she and Ethan might help you with paperwork. For peace of mind." Rosa's eyes were kind. But the kindness hurt too. It meant she had been asked to see me a certain way. I set the mug down carefully. "Rosa, would you do something for me?" "Anything. Don't us decide who I am based on what they say." Her mouth softened. "I never do, but I need you to tell me if you need help. Real help." I nodded and promised, and I meant it. But promises are easy until you have to make them to yourself. That night, I stopped by the cemetery. Marianne's stone caught the orange of the streetlight like a low ember. I told her about the charges, about the HVAC bill, about the way Ethan's laugh had been a different kind of stranger than any I'd ever met. I told her I was holding it together. I did not tell her my hands shook the whole time. On Wednesday, September 28th, the same date on the HVAC invoice, I came home to a small wrongness. My front door latch turned too easily. Nothing looked disturbed, nothing stolen, but the house didn't feel like mine when I stepped inside. I went straight to the hook by the back door where I keep the spare key for emergencies. The little brass soldier hung alone, key gone. I stood there with the empty hook in my hand like it might offer an explanation. Then a thought slotted into place with the perfect cruelty of a puzzle piece, emergency. Yes, but whose? I checked the drawer where I keep my car title. Still there, tucked under Marianne's birthday card from 2019. I checked the ledger, present, rubber band tight. Then I checked the freezer where I hide my second ledger copy, vacuum sealed behind the Italian beef. Still there. I laughed. A dry sound. Marianne had called me paranoid back then, with love. Now I thanked my past self for being the kind of man who keeps a ledger next to frozen meat. On Friday, September 30th, I tried to talk to Ethan without Kayla near us, without the smirk that made me feel like a man slipping on black ice. He was in my living room scrolling, feet on my coffee table. "Hey, Dad, did you borrow the spare key?" He blinked. "What? No? Why?" "It's missing. Maybe you misplaced it." He lifted his phone again, then paused. "We can just change the locks if it's stressing you." I shall call a guy. The way he said a guy told me everything I needed to know about his plan, keep me feeling small, keep himself sounding competent. I heard Marianne again. Order before anger. I swallowed both. On Monday, October 3rd, the wound turned itself into a question. What if I am slipping? I woke up staring at my ceiling and thought names, dates, numbers. I recited them like a rosary. Marianne's oncologist, the make and model of the PFAF sewing machine in my shop, the license plate of my truck. I missed nothing. But the doubt was a stain. It spread. That evening, Ethan stopped by, too cheerful. Dad, how sips the shop? Fine. Cool, cool. He sat, dropped a hand on my shoulder. A practiced touch. About the HVAC thing. Let me just take the stress. I said I'll handle it. You relax. Relax, I repeated. You said I'll handle my signature? He smiled, a patient smile people use on old men and bank lines. I said I'll handle the big stuff. You don't need to worry about bills and forms. It sets a lot. I handled 30 years of bills and forms, I said softly. Why would I stop now? Because you were grieving. He sounded like he rehearsed that line in the mirror. And because sometimes it's good to delegate. Delegate my life to my son. The boy whose handwriting still lives in a shoebox in the attic. Crayon labels for Pinewood Derby trophies. To Dad scrawled like lightning. Delegation, he called it. Leave the invoice, I said. I said review it. His smile thinned. You don't trust me. I have some trying to trust facts. Kayla stepped in from the kitchen where she been too quiet. Facts. The fact is we care, but if pride is more important, I stood. Go home. Her face changed. She didn't mask it quickly enough. I caught a flicker, money, impatience, a schedule slipping. She tugged Ethan's sleeve. They left with the door unlocked. I locked it behind them twice. Then I pressed my forehead to the wood and let myself feel it, not madness. Not confusion, collapse, yes, but the collapse of being rewritten while still alive. That night, I sat in Marianne Sepp's chair. I pulled her blue shawl over my knees like a blanket and let the confession happen in my chest. I am scared, I said into the empty room. Not of forgetting, of being erased. The house answered with the slow tick of the oven timer I always set when I cook, a habit that had become a ritual after Kayla found a burner left on in July and made a scene about safety. I had written it in a notebook. Then July 14th, timer set to 45 minutes, turned off 7:16 p.m., burner inspected, cool, proof against narratives. It felt ridiculous then. It felt holy now. On Tuesday, October 4th, I turned grief into labor. I reorganized my shop for the third time this year. I labeled bins, tightened bolts, cleaned the stitcher until its metal gleamed. In the rhythm I found an answer. Collapse isn't madness. Collapse is what your soul does when someone you love tries to edit you out, and you can't outshout an editor. You can only outwrite them. So I started writing my life, one record at a time. I laid out every bill on my work table under the fluorescent light. September bank statements on the left, cash receipts in the center, invoices on the right. I taped a yellow legal pad to the table and made 3 columns. Date, charge, story, not vendor, story. I made myself write what each charge meant to me in my handwriting, so no one could say it wasn't mine. September 14th, Cleveland Fitness Plus, not mine. Annotated, never been. I walk the cemetery trail for exercise. September 19th, Candle Company, not mine. Annotated, can't stand the smell of vanilla since Marianne's last hospital room. September 22nd, Meal Kit A, not mine. Annotated, I cook from the freezer in farmer's market, see receipts. September 28th, HVAC install, not mine. Annotated, check signature. HM unlike mine. As I wrote, I felt my heart slow. Order is a hammock you weave for yourself, one string at a time. On Thursday, October 6th, I went to church to polish the old pews, volunteer work, wood and quiet, and the smell of lemon oil. Pastor Green, a man built like a coat rack and kindness, watched me for a while. You all right, Hal? I'm documenting, I said. Documenting what? Who I am. He nodded like a man who understood the size of that task. Good work, then. When I left, the sun hit the stained glass and set the floor on fire with color. I stood in it for 1 full minute and gave myself permission to be tired without being weak. Back home, I made a list, a real one, inked and dated. If they're building incompetence, I'll build truth beneath it. Locksmith, keypad reset. Attorney, I didn't know the law. I didn't even know if what I suspected could be proven, but I knew this truth lives well on paper. On Friday, October 7th, a smaller test arrived disguised as a kindness. Ethan knocked at 6:10 p.m. with takeout from El Jalapeno on Clark. Dad, let's just eat, he said, containers sweating on my counter. We sat. He watched me unlock my phone to check the game score. What's your pin again? He asked. Casual as chewing? I looked at him a long time while the oven timer ticked in the background. The same as it's always been, I said, and turned the phone face down. In my head, a new list wrote itself. Not just locks and ledgers, recordings. I cleaned the kitchen after he left. Each wipe a decision. I placed the meal receipt, $28.43. Card ending in 1983. Ethan's into the drawer and underlined the date. People forget stories. Paper remembers. That night I opened my laptop and searched Ohio law until my eyes burned. One-party consent. I read it twice, lips moving. One party, me. I closed the computer, turned off the light, and felt the house settle around me, not as a cave but as a vault. Grief was still there. Marianne's shawl still draped over the chair, her knitting basket still holding a half-finished scarf, but beneath it something else had started. Not rage, resolve. If they were building a version of me that wasn't real, I would build the record that was, and I would start at the door. On Saturday morning, October 8th, I circled a number on my list and dialed. Yes, I told the locksmith. I need new deadbolts. Today. Because I had finally understood love can sound like doubt when it's spoken by people who need you to be smaller, and I was done shrinking. The first sound that morning was the drill. September 18th, 9:42 a.m., a crisp Saturday with the kind of air that bites your nose when you step outside. The locksmith, a wiry man with oil-stained jeans, leaned against my doorframe and said, Deadbolts will be solid, Mr. Mercer. Invoice will show $216. He handed me a carbon copy, dated, signed. I tucked it into my ledger before the smell of brass dust had even cleared. Every act of betrayal needed an answer, and this was mine, a new lock, an entry in the ledger, proof that I knew where my boundaries stood. 2 days later, September 20th, I reset the keypad at the shop. My upholsterer's haven, stacks of Italian leather, bolts of vinyl, rolls of thread in every color was sacred. I pressed the digits into the keypad, deliberately 3 times, until the machine beeped finality. Then I wrote it down. Code reset, September 20th, 8:14 a.m. It went into the brown ledger Marianne had given me all those Christmases ago. I ran my hand across the cover. She used to say the book was Hal's second heart. Now it was my shield. By then, the charges totaled more than $4,000. Ethan was bleeding me dry with the precision of a surgeon and the smirk of a gambler. Kayla, always in the background, played her role, smiles at church, whispers to neighbors about Hal's forgetfulness. They weren't just stealing money, they were stealing my reputation, my name. That's what drove me to the law office on October 2nd. Lila Shore's desk smelled faintly of cedar polish. She was younger than me by 20 years, hair pinned in a bun, voice calm but not soft. I slid the HVAC bill across the table, the one with the fake initials. She studied it with the focus of a jeweler inspecting a flawed diamond. The signature looks off, she said finally. She didn't glance up, just traced the initials with her pen. Not mine, I said. My voice cracked on the last word, but I steadied it. She nodded, jotting something on her legal pad. That detail might matter later. For now, Mr. Mercer, Ohio is a one-party consent state. You understand what that means? I shook my head. It means you can record conversations without telling the other person, as long as you separate part of the conversation. If you believe someone is building a case against you, you settle want more than just receipts. That night, I ordered a small recorder online, $49, black, slim, it looked like nothing. When it arrived, I slipped it into my pocket and pressed the red button like it was a trigger. October 7th, Ethan asked me again for my phone PIN while we were watching the Browns game. Come on, Dad, just in case you forget. The recorder caught it, his voice smooth, practiced. I didn't answer, just let the silence stretch. Let the weight of his question hang there. Later, when I played it back alone in my workshop, his tone made my stomach turn. On October 12th, Kayla Sepp's whisper drifted down the hall. He won Sept remembered, just push a little more. I pressed stop, rewound, played it again. The words didn't lose sharpness. They cut deeper. By the end of October, I tallied the ledger $9,340 gone. Not spent. Stolen. On November 2nd, I hired Marcus Bell, private investigator. He was an ex-cop, tired eyes, a voice that made you believe him before you should. I gave him copies of the invoices, bank statements, the HVAC bill. He tapped the pile and said, "Paper convicts. Pictures will too." The next Sunday, Pastor Green caught me outside the sanctuary. "You all right, Hal? You said been carrying yourself heavier these days." I looked at him and said the truest words I had. I said's been documenting, and I was. Every charge, every lock changed, every whisper recorded. By November 9th, I was ready for the bank, ready to put proof against performance. Because by then I understood Ethan and Kayla weren't just testing my memory, they were rehearsing for court, and I wasn't going to let them debut their play without a script of my own. Handoff November 9th bank meeting ahead. Recorder in pocket, Marcus on call. November 9th. Cleveland woke with a sky the color of tin. The kind of morning where your breath looks heavier than you feel. I walked into Lakeview Community Bank with my ledger under one arm, and my new recorder snug in the pocket of my jacket, the red light hidden but alive. Joe Pickens, branch manager, had known me for 15 years. He wore his tie loose, as if it choked him to keep secrets. We sat in his office, blinds half closed against the street. He spread the printouts across his desk, charges, withdrawals, transfers, and laid them out like a staircase. "Mr. Mercer, you see the pattern?" he asked, tapping one page. I leaned forward. "Tell me." "It's escalation. Small charges first, candles, gym memberships, then bigger, electronics, HVAC. It's called a theft staircase." He adjusted his glasses. $740 electronics purchase tied directly to Ethan Seth's number. I felt my throat burn. "Ethan?" Joe nodded. "We recommend a freeze. If it sets fraud, this stops the bleeding." I signed the form then and there, pen biting into the paper. The letter was dated November 10th. I underlined the date when I filed it later. Paper against whispers. 2 days later, November 12th, Ethan invited me to lunch. The diner smelled of grease and nostalgia. Formica tables crowded with old men in work coats. I slid into the booth across from him, recorder already rolling in my pocket. He smiled too easily. "Dad, you stare confused. We sterile handle the big stuff." "Big stuff?" I asked, pushing my coffee aside. "You know, house, bills, all that. You don't set need to be stressed." His words were syrup, but I heard the poison underneath. Control the assets. Declare the man incompetent. The recorder caught every syllable. November 14th. Marcus delivered his photos. A manila envelope slid across my workshop counter. Inside, Ethan at Metro Pawn on Lorraine Avenue. A roll of cigar-brown Italian leather under his arm. My leather, imported in 2018, batch 542. I knew it because I wrote the batch number in my ledger on April 16th of that year. Seeing it in his hands under pawn shop fluorescence was like watching him sell my heartbeat. That night my shop cam caught him at the keypad, fumbling the numbers. Kayla Sipp's voice was a hiss in the darkness. "Push him. He sips slipping." I replayed it twice, jaw tight, before saving it to a USB drive labeled with the date November 14th, shop cam. I sat in my workshop, lights off, recorder on the table. I whispered to the dark, "You set you're not just stealing leather, Ethan. You set her stealing my memory and trying to sell it too. The next morning, Lila Shore drafted a cease and desist. Her voice was low on the phone. This is the start of legal retaliation. They push harder. I stood at the window, November wind rattling the glass. Across the street, Rosa carried groceries in one arm. I thought of her words weeks earlier, tell me if you need real help. I realized this was beyond help. This was survival. I pressed record again, just to hear the click. The sound had become my anchor. Every lie they spoke, every whisper of incompetence, they thought it vanished like smoke. But I caught it, bottled it, kept it in the vault of plastic and wire. And for the first time since Marianne's passing, I felt steady. Handoff November 18th loomed, with Ethan's rage at the bank decline, Kayla's debt cracks showing, and my receipts ready to speak louder than their bloodlines. November 18th began with a phone call. I didn't hear, but I felt the consequences all the same. Ethan's card had declined. That afternoon he came pounding on my front door, fury in his knuckles. I let him in, knowing my recorder was already rolling from my jacket pocket. His voice cracked like a whip. Bank says you start confused. This he shook a folded letter in my face. This is why I need to step in legally. The letter was nothing more than a frozen account notice from Lakeview Community Bank, the one I'd signed with Joe Pickens on November 10th. But in Ethan's hands it had become theater. He paced my living room, voice raised for effect, as though an invisible jury sat between the armchairs. Do you even understand what you are doing? You are turning against your own blood. I kept my voice flat, my pulse steady. I set him protecting my own name. Kayla arrived 10 minutes later, slipping in behind him, brandishing her phone like a dagger. Look, she said, thrusting it in front of me. An email, subject line bold, debt notice. $1,960 past due. The sender, Credit Solutions, timestamp November 15th. I didn't miss the way her thumb trembled on the screen. Debt was her motive. The reason she whispered in corners, the reason she needed Ethan to hurry me into incompetence. I set the email aside and went to my workshop drawer. From it, I drew the brown ledger. I spread the pages across the coffee table like a magician turning over his cards. September 14th, Cleveland Fitness Plus, not mine, I said. September 19th, Candle Company, not mine. September 22nd, Meal Kit A, not mine. September 28th, HVAC install, not mine. I tapped each line with my finger, receipts stapled neatly behind. Kayla Sip's lips tightened. Ethan Estes' jaw locked. You set her drowning in debt, I said quietly to her. And you, I turned to Ethan, you set her trying to buy your life with my signature. Ethan slammed his hand against the table, rattling the ledger. You stir paranoid, sick. Marianne would never. Don't sit, I snapped. My voice rose for the first time, sharp as glass. Don't sit, put her in your mouth. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. On November 21st, I took my calm to Dr. Ramirez, a neuropsychologist recommended by Lila. His office smelled of eucalyptus and printer ink. He handed me sheets, draw a clock, repeat word lists, recall sequences backward. I did them all one by one, without hesitation. When he asked me to recall a grocery list 5 minutes later, I rattled it off as though reading it from my ledger. Apples, rice, detergent, coffee, chicken. When the session ended, he slid his notes into a folder. Mr. Mercer, you're organized beyond average. Cognitive function intact. He underlined the last word intact. I tucked the note into my manila envelope of proofs, beside the HVAC invoice and bank freeze. That evening, back at Lila's office, she played the recordings on her laptop. Ethan's voice. What's your pin again, Dad? Kayla's whisper. Push him. He's slipping. The shop cam clip, his failed keypad entry, her hiss in the dark. Lila's eyes sharpened with each file. Exhibit A, she said finally. This will be our compilation. We still let them speak for themselves. I watched the waveform lines dance across the screen and felt Marianne beside me. She used to say, Harold, paper sipped is one thing, but voices don't sit, lie. On November 27th, the petition arrived. Guardianship, filed by Ethan Mercer. Hearing date December 12th. I read the words 3 times. Each repetition felt like a nail in wood sealing me into a box they thought I couldn't climb out of. But I had the receipts, the recordings, the ledger. I sat down at my workbench, spread my documents into labeled stacks: bank, locks, pawn, medical, audio, and wrote across a yellow legal sheet in red marker, "Every receipt has a story, and so do I." I wasn't preparing for a fight anymore. I was preparing for trial. Handoff. The guardianship petition marked the line in the sand. Next December 1st, Kayla's public smear, pawn slips from Marcus and the house they wanted more than the father they denied. December came early that year. The air in Cleveland bit harder than usual, the wind off Lake Erie stinging my cheeks like needles. December 1st, I walked into the shop with my thermos steaming and Rosa already waiting at the counter. She held her phone out, screen lit, eyes wide. "Hal, have you seen this?" It was Kayla's Facebook post. A photo of me taken at a family barbecue last summer. Smiling, spatula in hand. Her caption read, "Pray for families struggling with dementia. It's harder than you think." The comments were already piling up. "Sending love, Kayla. Stay strong, girl." My name wasn't even in the post. But it didn't need to be. The narrative was set. A man disappearing. A family carrying the burden. I felt my jaw clench. Rosa touched my sleeve gently. "Don't read the comments," she said. But I read every one. Then I wrote the date in my ledger: December 1st, smear campaign begins. On December 3rd, Marcus Bell walked into my workshop with a folder thicker than his patience. He spread out pawn slips, each one printed, signed, and time-stamped. Roll of Italian leather, $280. Chrome rivet set, $90. Sewing machine motor, $780. Total $1,150. He tapped the pile. All pawned by Ethan, all on Lorraine Avenue. Surveillance confirms. I added them to my binder, tabbed Exhibit C. Pawn. Then, on December 5th, a letter arrived. Protective arrangement notice. Ethan claimed I had left the stove on for hours, a danger to myself and others. His handwriting was blocky, too neat. Kayla's coaching, no doubt. But I had my oven timer journal. Every cooking session logged: date, time, minutes set, minutes turned off. Verification. December 2nd. I'd roasted chicken thighs. Timer 42 minutes. Shut off at 6:15 p.m. Written in ink. My initials beside it. Proof doesn't stitch out. It waits, steady as a stone. On December 9th, I overheard them again. They were in the living room, speaking low, but the recorder in my pocket didn't miss a word. "Ethan, judge will see he seps slipping. It seps in the bag. Kayla, get the house, then rehab it, flip it for a profit." The way she said it, cold, transactional, like my home was nothing but drywall and equity. Like the memories Marianne and I built there, our Christmas tree by the window, her laughter in the kitchen, were just obstacles to her payday. I pressed stop and stared at the recorder in my palm. Proof again. December 10th. Leela met me in her office. Papers spread across her desk like battle plans. "Speak plain," she told me. "Paper convicts. You don't need to be clever. You need to be consistent." She slid a black binder across the table, labeled neatly in her handwriting: Exhibit audio recordings. Exhibit B bank freeze. Exhibit C locksmith invoice. Exhibit D pawn slips. Exhibit E Dr. Ramirez's capacity report. 5 sections. Each one a nail for their coffin of lies. On December 12th, Lila said, "We walk into that courtroom with the truth. They shall come armed with pity. We welcome armed with proof." I nodded, feeling the weight of the USB drive in my pocket. It contained every recording, every whisper, every betrayal turned into evidence. That night I pressed my suit. The navy one Marianne loved. She used to say it made me look like the man she married. The man who could fix anything. I stood in the mirror, tie knotted, and whispered to my reflection, "Not senile, not slipping. Ready." December 11th. I barely slept. The house was too quiet, the walls holding their breath. I walked room to room, touching the door frames, the photos, the ledger on my desk. My fortress, my proof. When dawn came, I poured black coffee, placed the binder in my briefcase, and slid the USB drive into my pocket. My fingers brushed it like a talisman. December 12th loomed, court awaited. Handoff. Next is the courtroom, where Ethan will speak the word senile and Exhibit A will turn their lies into their undoing. December 12th, Cleveland Municipal Courthouse. The marble floors echoed every footstep, every cough, every nervous shuffle like a drumbeat. I walked past the metal detector, briefcase in hand, USB drive in my pocket. My suit was pressed, my tie neat, my shoes polished. My heart, though, beat like a piston under strain. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and paper, rows of wooden benches, sunlight bleeding pale through high windows. Judge Hart presided from the bench, spectacles low on his nose, gavel resting within reach. Ethan sat to the right, shoulders squared, wearing a tailored gray suit he couldn't afford without my money. Kayla sat beside him, face painted with grief, tissue in hand. When she spotted me, her lips curved, not in warmth, but in victory rehearsed. The bailiff called the case. In re guardianship of Harold Mercer. My name and public record tethered to incompetence. The words rang like a bell tolling for the living. Ethan was called first. He rose, buttoned his jacket, and began. His voice was smooth, almost too smooth, like a salesman who knows his pitch by heart. My father has been slipping, he said. He forgets things, bills, keys, even conversations. He leaves the stove on. He gets confused in stores. My wife and I have stepped in where we can, but it's since become clear he can manage his affairs alone. He paused, letting the silence sink in. Kayla dabbed her eyes with the tissue, the picture of filial sorrow. Ethan pressed on. We start not doing this for money. We start doing this out of love. My father is senile. The word landed like a hammer blow. Senile, spoken out loud, under oath, against me. My stomach turned, but my eyes stayed steady on him. Across the aisle, Lila Shore rose from her chair, calm, precise. She didn't rush. She smoothed the front of her suit and approached the bench. Your Honor, she said, voice steady. The petitioner has made serious claims. We submit Exhibit A. From her case, she withdrew the black binder, the USB drive, and the printed transcripts. She handed the USB to the bailiff, who slid it into the courtroom computer. The first recording played, speakers crackling softly. Ethan's voice clear as a bell. What's your pin again, Dad? Just in case you forget. I watched Judge Hartsip's eyes lift from his notes. The second clip, Kayla's whisper, hushed but damning. Push him, he's slipping. The courtroom grew still. Even the air conditioner seemed to hush. Then the third, the shop cam audio. Ethan at the keypad, muttering curses, Kayla hissing, get the house, then rehab it. The words hung in the courtroom like smoke, visible, undeniable. Leila let the silence linger. Then she said, these are not the words of caretakers. These are the words of conspirators. She placed more documents on the judge's bench, the locksmith invoice dated September 18th, the bank freeze letter signed November 10th, Dr. Ramirez's report declaring me organized beyond average, and the pawn slips from Marcus Bell. Your Honor, my client is not senile. He is methodical. He is meticulous. He is the target of exploitation. Ethan's composure cracked. His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists. Kayla dropped the tissue, her face pale beneath the makeup. Judge Hart adjusted his glasses and spoke, voice like stone. Guardianship is denied. Furthermore, given the evidence presented, I am referring this matter to the Elder Justice Unit for investigation. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. I exhaled for the first time in weeks. The ledger, the recordings, the receipts. They had spoken louder than pity, louder than tears, louder than blood. As the courtroom emptied, Ethan avoided my gaze. Kayla vanished into the hallway, like smoke dispersing. Rosa touched my shoulder softly from the back row, whispering, You did it, Hal. You spoke plain. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth had answered for me. Handoff, justice landed, but restitution still ahead. The aftermath would echo louder than their accusations. The silence after a gavel strike is strange. It isn't really silence, it's papers shuffling, shoes on linoleum, throats clearing. But it feels like silence because something larger has ended. December 12th, 11:42 a.m. The guardianship case was closed, and with it my son's plan to erase me. By the time I stepped into the cold air outside the courthouse, Kayla had disappeared. Not a word, not even a glance. She slipped out a side door like smoke escaping a fire. Ethan, though, lingered. He leaned against a pillar, his tie askew, face drawn tight with something between rage and shame. I walked past him without a word. But that night, at 1:22 a.m., my phone lit up. A voicemail. Dad. His voice cracked through the static. We need to talk. Please, call me back. I didn't net. December 16th, 4 days later, Lila filed the restitution demand, $13,290. Every charge tallied, every pawn slip added, every fraudulent invoice logged. It wasn't about revenge now, it was arithmetic. At Lakeview Bank, Joe Pickens slid the papers across the desk. We've reversed what we can. Candles, gym, spa, total refunds $2,180. The rest will come through restitution. He adjusted his glasses. Mr. Mercer, most people don't catch this kind of fraud until it's too late. You were diligent. Diligent. A softer word than paranoid, but it meant the same thing now. I survived by keeping order. That evening Rosa came by with coffee in a thermos. She sat across my kitchen table, her eyes warm but steady. You sounded so calm in there, she said, stirring sugar into her cup. Calm as muscle, I told her. You train it, you hold it, you don't let go, just because blood says you should. She smiled faintly. You sound like Marianne. For a moment I heard Marianne's voice too, in the quiet between us. Keep things in order, Hal. That's how you win. 2 nights later, another voicemail from Ethan. I'm sorry. That was all he said. Just 2 words. But sorry isn't repayment. Sorry doesn't buy back stolen leather or return the dignity pawned off for cash. Sorry doesn't erase lies whispered into microphones. On December 19th, I sat in Lila Sepsis' office again, the binder between us. The prosecutor wants to interview you on the 20th. She said, bring everything. Originals, copies, recordings. I nodded. Paper convicts, I said softly. She smiled. Yes, Mr. Mercer. And Yusuf got a library. That night, I walked through my house with the recorder in my hand. Not running this time, just holding it. I walked past Marianne's chair, the blue shawl still draped across the back, her knitting basket still untouched. I thought about all the whispers Kayla had spread, all the pity she had courted online. And I thought about the truth. Truth echoes louder than blood when blood betrays you. Handoff. Next is the prosecutor's office on December 20th. Signatures, settlements, and justice signed in ink. December 20th, 9 a.m. Elder Justice Unit, downtown Cleveland. The building didn't look like much, just another brick office wedged between a bail bond shop and a diner that smelled like burnt toast. But inside it carried a gravity I could feel in my bones. The receptionist led me to a conference room. Long table, fluorescent lights humming, a state seal stamped into the wall. Across from me sat Assistant Prosecutor Daniel Kerrigan, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened like he'd been up all night. He tapped his pen against a yellow pad. Mr. Mercer, he began, tell me everything. Start from the first charge. So I did. September 14th, $84.19, at Cleveland Fitness Plus. I laid down the bank statement. September 19th, candles. September 22nd, meal kits. Each line, each receipt, I pulled from my binder and set before him like puzzle pieces. Then the HVAC invoice with the forged initials, the locksmith invoice dated September 18th, the pawn slips from Lorraine Avenue, Dr. Ramirez's report stamped intact. I slid over the USB with the recordings. Exhibit A, I said, the word now part of my vocabulary. Kerrigan plugged it in, pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room. What's your pin again, Dad? Just in case you forget. Then Kayla, get the house, then rehab it. He scribbled notes furiously. When the clips ended, he leaned back, whistled low. Textbook exploitation. We as got enough for criminal charges. Theft, fraud, possibly elder abuse statutes. He looked at me over the rims of his glasses. Do you want to push for trial? I thought of Marianne's shawl, of Rose's steady hand on my shoulder, of Ethan's voicemail at 1:22 a.m. We need to talk. I want restitution, I said finally. And I want the truth on record. December 22nd. Ethan arrived at Lila's office with his attorney, a thin man in a pinstripe suit who smelled of aftershave and desperation. Ethan's face was pale, eyes darting. He carried a cashier's check, $9,340, the bulk of what he'd stolen. His lawyer slid it across the table. This is a settlement offer, the man said, voice clipped. Mr. Mercer Sipps's son is prepared to return the funds, provided we sign a consent judgment for the remainder, $3,950, payable within 6 months. I looked at the check. My name printed clean, the bank seal embossed, the ink fresh. Not just money, an admission. Lila tapped her pen against the table. And if he defaults? Then the judgment is enforceable. Wage garnishment, liens, standard remedies. I studied Ethan's face. His jaw clenched, eyes wet but unrepentant. He wasn't sorry. He was cornered. I signed the judgment. My hand didn't tremble. When it was done, Ethan shoved the check forward. Here, take it. I slid it into my ledger between September and December, not as forgiveness, as evidence. December 23rd, my account at Lakeview Bank reflected the deposit. My balance restored. My shop keys still in my pocket, locks secure, leather rolls untouched. I walked out of the bank that morning into sharp winter sun, breath fogging the air. For the first time in months, I felt taller, like I wasn't carrying the weight of suspicion on my back anymore. Justice hadn't come as thunder. It came in ink, in signatures, in paper trails that told the truth louder than words ever could. But restitution doesn't fix everything. It fills the account. It doesn't fill the empty chair at the dinner table or erase the word senile spoken in court. Still, I told myself, justice signed in ink is better than silence signed in shame. Hand off, legal justice secured. But the emotional cost still lingers. Next, Act 10. Quiet nights, reflection, and the cost of surviving your own blood. The house was quiet again. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet of suspicion, but the kind that comes after a storm. December 24th. Christmas Eve, I sat in Marianne's chair with the tree lit in the corner. The ornaments glowed. Some faded from years of use, others shiny and new, but every one carried her touch. I looked at the ledger on my lap, now thicker than ever. Every charge, every pawn slip, every receipt, proof of survival. But also proof of cost. The cost wasn't just $13,290. It was the fracture in my chest every time Ethan's voice replayed in my head. He's senile. The words echoed louder than the recordings themselves. Nights became quieter in a way that felt almost cruel. No phone calls from Ethan. No knocks on the door from Kayla. No whispers trying to rewrite me. The silence gave me room to think. But sometimes thinking was worse than fighting. I started writing on index cards. Each one a rule I had earned the hard way. Keep records, not just for bills, but for memory. Keep dignity, even when blood betrays you. Keep the door locked, because sometimes the danger isn't outside. It's inside your own family. I tucked the cards into a shoebox on my dresser, my private commandments. On December 28th, I stopped by the cemetery again. Snow-dusted Marianne's stone, her name carved deep, dates too short. I brushed it clean with my glove and told her about the courtroom, about Lila, about how Ethan's lies had cracked under proof. I did what you always said, Marianne, I whispered, order before anger, paper before shouting. The wind carried no answer, but I felt steadier. January came. The first restitution payment cleared on the 5th, $658. Not much, but enough to make the paper trail real. Ethan was bound not by love, but by law. And maybe that was the only leash that mattered now. I didn't fool myself. My son wasn't gone. He was out there living under the weight of his own signature, but he was learning, whether he admitted it or not, that betrayal comes with consequences. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with Rosa. She poured tea into chipped mugs, steam curling between us. "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" she asked. I stirred my tea, staring at the swirl. Forgive? I don't set no. But I said I'll remember, and remembering is stronger than forgiving when someone tries to erase you. She nodded. You didn't set lose him, Hal. He lost you. Her words sank deep, but I knew the truth. I hadn't lost myself either. Not to grief, not to lies, not to whispers. As I turned off the lights that night, I said it aloud just to hear the words in the air. Evidence speaks louder than anger. And I believed it. Because in the end, my ledger wasn't just proof for court. It was proof for me that I was still here, still capable, still the man Marianne loved. Aphorism. You didn't lose me. You gave me away, and I walked back to myself. Handoff. The main arc closes here, but echoes remain. Optional Act 11 will carry the personal epilogue, Rose's pantry, Ethan's apology letter, and the repayments that proved paper wins where whispers fail. January settled over Cleveland like an old wool coat, heavy, familiar, and lined with cold. By the 5th, the first restitution payment cleared. $658 wired directly into my account. I wrote it into the ledger, not in red ink this time, but in black. Not as theft, as return. Proof that the world sometimes gives back what it takes. A week later, Rosa called me over. Bring your toolbox, she said. My pantry door sips sticking. Her apartment smelled like rosemary and fresh bread. The way it always did. I knelt at the pantry with screwdriver in hand, adjusting hinges when she said softly, "Check the inside of the door." I frowned, stood, and pulled it open. Taped to the inside panel was an envelope, my name scrawled across it in Ethan's uneven handwriting. I didn't move at first, just stared at it, the tape frayed at the corners, the ink heavy where his pen had pressed too hard. "Rosa," my voice was low. "He asked me to hold it," she said. "Said he wasn't set or brave enough to give it to you directly." I peeled it free. Inside was a single sheet, written on lined notebook paper. "Dad, I know sorry doesn't count, but I am. I was drowning and I dragged you down instead of asking for help. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'll make the payments. I'll make it right as much as I can. Ethan," I read it twice. My chest felt tight, not from anger this time, but from the space between the words. He wasn't asking to come home. He wasn't asking for my blessing, just leaving proof of regret in a place he thought I'd eventually find. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into my binder under Exhibit E. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but evidence of change. By February 5th, the second restitution payment cleared. Another $658. Slow, steady, like bricks being laid into a wall. Marcus Bell came by the shop that week. He set down his final invoice. $620 for his services. Every pawn slip documented. Every photograph printed. I wrote him a check on the spot. He tipped his hat. Not often I see a client win this clean. I walked him out. The winter air sharp on my face. Inside the shop, the smell of leather was strong again. No whispers, no theft, no shadow at the keypad. Just me, my hands, and the hum of the stitcher. For the first time in months, the shop didn't feel like a battleground. It felt like home. Rosa dropped by one evening with soup. She opened the pantry for crackers, and I saw the tape marks where Ethan's letter had been. Empty now, but the outline still there. A reminder that even betrayal can leave behind something other than ashes. Maybe not reconciliation, but at least a record. Handoff. The story could end here, but one final circle remains, the HVAC forgery that started it all, and the ironic refund that proved paper always speaks last. March 18th, a Tuesday. The call came just after lunch. I was in the shop trimming a panel of saddle brown leather when the phone rang. A woman Sip's voice on the other end, clipped and businesslike. "Mr. Mercer? This is Elaine, from Cleveland Heating and Air. We set her calling regarding invoice hash 4417 dated September 28th. My breath caught. Yes? We'd have concluded an internal audit. The technician who signed your installation invoice has been terminated for forgery. We'd have to issuing a full refund of $2,800. Check will be mailed within 7 business days. For a moment, I just stared at the receiver. That single forged invoice had been the crack Ethan used to pry open his whole case against me. The proof he thought would make me look senile. And now, months later, the company itself had called it what it was: fraud. When I hung up, I laughed. Not bitter, not broken, just a laugh that came from somewhere deep, like a knot finally loosening. A week later, the check arrived. I walked it straight to Lakeview Bank, deposited it with Joe Pickens himself. He raised his eyebrows. Vindication? More than that, I said. Closure. That evening, I bought Rosa a new kettle with part of the refund. Stainless steel, whistling spout. Sturdy enough to last decades. She unwrapped it at her kitchen table and smiled. Mary Ann would have liked this, she said. Yes. I nodded. She would have told me to keep the receipt. 2 days later, Ethan knocked on my door. He stood on the porch, hat in hand, posture slouched like a boy caught lying. His eyes couldn't quite meet mine. You were right about paper, he said. No excuses, no performance, just that. I let him in. We drank tea, Rosa's kettle whistling fresh from its box. We didn't talk about forgiveness, because forgiveness wasn't the point. Rules were boundaries. He sat across from me, quiet, sipping from a mug. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a defendant in my own house. I felt like myself again. The ledger sat on the table between us, thick and steady, every receipt, every charge, every proof. Not a prison of paper, my freedom. Because in the end, it wasn't anger that saved me. It wasn't shouting or pleading or even blood. It was the record, the truth. And sometimes the truth comes not in thunder but in ink, in refunds, in the simple sound of a kettle whistling in a quiet kitchen.